Australian faunas are known to be, let's just say, exceptional. Most of them are deadly, elapids like death adder, spiders, and you're not even safe on the coast because there are things like box jellyfish, blue ring octopus, and other marine animals with potent toxin. However, some are famous in a different way. You could argue it's the opposite end of the spectrum, like the topic of this video for example. They are known for their weird feces and hard arts, quite literally. So, let me bring up the question. What exactly is wombat? Wombat is a mammal. To be precise, they are marsupials, which means they have pouch. They are classified in the Diprotodontia order. That name translates to two front teeth, because members of this order have prominent large pair of incisors. By the way, that's a unique trait because most mammals have more than one pair of incisors. Diprotodontia is a big order. It includes three extant suborder: Macropodiformes, which includes kangaroos; Phalangeriformes, which includes possums, gliders, and cuscus; and Vombatiformes, which of course includes wombat. What's probably not obvious is it also includes koala. And yeah, wombat's closest relative is the koala. Koala is classified in its own family, Phascolarctidae, while wombats are classified in Wombatidae family. Pretty easy to remember, right? There are two genera in this family, Wombatus, which is also easy to remember, and the not so easy one for those who are not familiar with scientific name, Lasiorhinus. Wombatus only has one species, the common wombat, Wombatus ursinus, which basically means bear-like wombat. Meanwhile, Lasiorhinus basically means hairy nose, and the common name for these species is hairy-nosed wombat. So yeah, it's actually pretty easy to remember if you understand the meaning. There are two species of hairy-nosed wombat, Lasiorhinus crafti, which is the northern hairy-nosed wombat, and Lasiorhinus latifrons, which is the southern hairy-nosed wombat. Crafti is a tribute for Gerhard Kraft, a German naturalist who mostly done his work in Australia. Meanwhile, latifrons means broad front. Now, I admit this one is not easy to remember. And to be honest, the latifrons name in particular could confuse you because, well, I'll show you in the morphology section in a bit. Wombats are, of course, endemic to Australia. Common wombat can be found in southeastern Australia. Southern hairy-nosed wombat can be found in southern to southwestern Australia. Meanwhile, northern hairy-nosed wombat is critically endangered and now can only be found in the Epping National Forest. Now, let's talk about their morphology. In general, wombats look plump. Adult wombats are around 1 meter long and weigh around 30 kilograms. Their furs are typically light brown to dark brown, but can also be blackish. They have small roundish ears, large roundish head, small eyes, and short stumpy tail. Even though it doesn't look like it, their rump is hardened because they have a cartilage plate under the skin. While this trait is quite famous on wombat, their relative, which is koala, actually also share this trait, albeit mostly for a different purpose, which I'll talk about that later. Let's continue talking about the morphology first. Like I said earlier, they have a pair of incisors on each jaw. Not only that, their teeth don't have root, and they grow continuously. Oh, by the way, I'm not just talking about the incisors, I'm talking about the entire teeth. So yeah, unlike rodents which have ever-growing incisors, all of wombats' teeth are ever-growing. Moving on, they have 5 toes, but the thumb is reduced and have no claw. Talking about the 3 species, the one you typically see all around the internet is the common wombat. The hairy-nosed wombats have hairy nose, which admittedly should be quite obvious, but I'll show you just in case. By the way, when I say hairy nose, I'm not talking about whiskers. I'm talking about the actual nose. The nose is covered in fur, and it's relatively squarish compared to common wombat's nose. Besides that, common wombat has rounder and plumpier head, while hairy-nosed wombats have a more defined face. Common wombat is also typically smaller than hairy-nosed wombats. The ears of hairy-nosed wombats are also relatively longer compared to common wombats. Now, comparing the two hairy-nosed wombats, the southern hairy-nosed wombat has longer nasal bone compared to the northern one, which in turn gives them the longer face look, which is why I say the name could be confusing because their scientific name means white front, but they don't seem to have that wide of a face, especially compared to the northern one, which looks like they have the wider face, but it is what it is. The southern hairy-nosed wombat is discovered earlier after all, so maybe that's why they are given that name, because the only comparison they have was the common wombat. Next, let's talk about their lifestyle. But before that, wombats are not typically active during the day. They are mostly crepuscular and nocturnal animal. However, they could go out during the day if they want to or need to. Wombats make burrows and spend a lot of time inside it. They dig with their claws and their teeth, which is why having an ever-growing teeth is quite useful since it's continuously chipped throughout their life. They can share this burrow with other individuals. In fact, other animals could also use their burrow, like rabbits, wallabies, quails, even monitor lizards. In fact, a research was published that shows wombats' burrows are important for the survival rate of many species during bushfire. Aside from mostly not being diurnal animals and them staying inside their burrows a lot of the time, wombats are also relatively quiet, so they are not often seen in the wild. In fact, we mostly detect traces of wombats by finding their feces. Their feces are unique among animals because they are cube-shaped. They can produce up to 100 feces per day, and they leave it all over the place to mark their territory. Fun fact, the shape of their feces was once a big mystery, and for years or even centuries, we couldn't figure out how that's even possible. Their anus is round, so that shouldn't be the answer. Oh, and they are herbivores, and they mostly eat grasses, and grasses are definitely not cube-shaped, so that's also not the answer. Back in 2021, a research was published that answered this question. It actually involves complex mathematical analysis, but to put it simply, their intestine has regions with twofold increase in thickness and fourfold increase in stiffness. These regions alternate with soft regions, and by a specific series of contraction, it enables them to produce cube-shaped feces. That's neat, but you might think, why would they need to have such unique feces? Well, the most likely answer is cube-shaped feces are harder to roll away, which enables them to stay on the spot, and that is better for marking territories. Wombats can breed every 2 years. Their reproduction typically relies on rainfall. Rainfall germinates the grasses, which means abundant food for them. At those times, they mate. They typically mate in their burrow, but sometimes they are seen mating outside. They typically mate sideways, or at least one of them do, either the male or the female. Gestation period lasts for 20 to 30 days. They give birth to only one offspring during each reproduction cycle, and like other marsupials, joey will stay in their mother's pouch. They stay inside the pouch for 5 to 9 months. Common wombat's joey tends to stay in the pouch for fewer months, while northern hairy-nosed wombat is known to stay in the pouch longer. They are fully weaned at around 1 year old, and become sexually mature at around 3 years old. While wombats are typically not aggressive, they will attack you if they are threatened. They can bite you, and their claws are strong and sharp enough to cause some damages. However, naturally, their main defense is their hard R's, literally. Like I said earlier, they have thickened rump due to the cartilage plate beneath their rump skin. When burrowing, they tend to cover the opening with their rump. And yeah, that is their defense. They exhibit phreatmosis to some extent. By the way, I've talked about phreatmosis before, so if you haven't heard of that term yet, I suggest checking this video. Anyway, there's also some myth regarding their butt being used to smash predators' skull, which is quite something to be honest. It's a pretty famous myth too. However, there is no scientific evidence to back that myth. Like I said, it's for defense. It's not used for shield bashing their opponent. So calling it a dangerous weapon is far-fetched. Unless we actually find concrete evidence in the future, of course. But for now, it stays as a myth. Wombats' evolution is actually not well known. Wombat fossils dates back to the late Oligocene, which is around 25 to 27 million years ago. That is the Rhizopascolonus, known from some teeth and mandible fragment fossils. The most famous wombat fossil would be the Phascolonus, a giant wombat from the Pliocene to Pleistocene Australia. Phascolonus gigas is the biggest wombat that we know. They were abundant across Australia, which is also why they are relatively known. And by the way, yeah, all fossil records are from Australia, which means they most likely evolved from a marsupial ancestor in Australia. Not a shocking fact, to be honest, but sometimes fossil records can be surprising and interesting, so we'll see in the future if something surprising is discovered. While common wombat and south hairy-nosed wombat are considered least concern, the northern hairy-nosed wombat is classified as critically endangered. Like I said earlier, they can only be found in the Epping Forest National Park in Queensland, and naturally, they are protected. Meanwhile, the common wombat is typically not protected. In fact, some consider them as pests to be eradicated. That's one of the reasons why common wombats' population is declining. Besides human persecution, there are also other factors, like habitat loss, disease, and the classic problem of invasive alien species in Australia. The common wombat is actually not that common now. Even though wombat is most likely not the first thing that came up in people's mind when thinking about Australian fauna, wombat is, of course, still iconic. There are wombat sculptures here and there in Australia. Apparently, wombat is also an unofficial mascot for the 2000 Summer Olympics, and the mascot is called Fatso, the fat-arsed wombat, which is quite the name if I do say so myself. So yeah, there is enough attention to wombat, which means there will definitely be more research on wombat coming on. Who knows what surprising fact we'll learn in the future. But for now, let's just learn what is known. And that's all for now. Oh, by the way, a group of wombats is called a wisdom. When you think about it, these names given to groups of animals are quite interesting, isn't it? That would be a nice topic to delve into. Anyway, enjoy your day.